Tuesday, December 1st, 2011. This is the start of an interview with Mr. Edward J. Mylenek at the RSVP offices of Catholic Services of Macomb, located at 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan. Mr. Mylenek is 81 years of age and was born February 16, 1930. He currently resides at 26536 Haas Street in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, 48127. My name is James Buckley, and I will be the interviewer, and Mylenek will be the videographer. Okay, Mr. Mylenek, would you please state for the record the branch of service you served in?
I was drafted into the United States Army in September of 1951 in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay. Draft
Board 96.
Okay, well, let's kind of backtrack just a little bit to see that you were born in it says Hamtramck, so kind of just cover your early years, if you would. And
well, my early years, as a youngster, my two older brothers served in WW2, World War II. My oldest brother was a gunner aboard a B-24 and served in the Pacific. And my second oldest brother was a Navy man, and he too served in the Atlantic and Pacific aboard an aircraft carrier during World War II. So I recall as a youngster growing up and idolizing them for the service they gave to our country, and they both were in missions and they were in the war proper. So that was an experience. I grew up on the east side of Detroit. I was born in Hamtramck. I attended elementary school in Detroit, and I graduated from Pershing High School in 1948. And after graduation, I started Wayne State University, and my idea was liberal arts. I was majoring in business administration and typing and accounting, and I had desires or ambition to perhaps become a accountant or a certified public accountant. And it was then that Uncle Sam, the draft was taking place, the Korean conflict was, I was watching the news because I was of draft age. Even though I was in college, I wouldn't be, I would have to serve my country, and I had the draft and was waiting to either be called into duty for and being drafted, and sure enough, my name was pulled. I got my greetings letter, and I went down and had a physical and found out I was qualified to serve my country. I got drafted and entered the United States Army in, I believe, of September of '51. I went to Fort Wayne, Michigan. I had a physical. I went into 5 days later, believe it or not. I was put on a train and was headed for California, because a group of us that were drafted at that time, and at that time, Hawaii was not a state of the United States. Right. It was a territory. But we had Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, and this was the Korean conflict, and Schofield was a territory where the terrain was similar to that of Korea. And we were called, those of us who were headed for California, they called us pineapples. Hawaii, the pineapples. Right. And the servicemen frowned upon it, that they should, dubbed us pineapples. Right. But we, being green in that, we just knew we had something to do, and 5 days later we boarded a ship and we were on our way to Hawaii to serve our bivouac in the United States Infantry.
What island was that?
We were on Oahu. and we were at Schofield Barracks. And at the time we hit Oahu, as I mentioned, Hawaii was the territory, and believe it or not, at that particular time, they had just finished filming From Here to Eternity with Frank Sinatra, which became an Academy Award winner for Sinatra and for the entire Burt Lancaster. And it was the, if you recall, the real hot scene with Burt Lancaster and, oh, I already forget her name, the water scene in Hawaii. We were at the barracks, and they had just finished filming it, From Here to Eternity, and we were at the following barracks where the filming took place, and that's where we spent 16 weeks becoming infantrymen. The training there was, as I said, the terrain was similar to the terrain that we were going to experience. Those of us, not all of us, went to Korea, but I would assure you that the majority of us were heading towards Korea because the conflict was, and at that time they were in discussion about trying to settle, and all of us kept praying that they will reach a settlement, and you know, we would reach Korea and there would be peace, and we would just be there as peace giving support.
Right.
The basic training we did receive was magnificent. It was 16 weeks of thorough. Most basic training statesides were anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. We spent 16 weeks in an area where the terrain, as I mentioned, we had hills, we had valleys, similar terrain to that of Korea. The only thing we did not experience was because Hawaii, being a warm weather area, we experienced the jungles. When we went into areas of basic training there, it was daylight like it is here, and we'd go into the jungle, and you would go into an area, and it turned completely dark because of the foliage before you.
Right.
And it was an area where it was dark and muddy, and when we were doing our training, we would go up 5 feet in the mud, slide down 3. Climbing a hill was treacherous, but it was all part of good, wonderful training and experience, and we would, it was live fire bivouac. And when you reached the top of the area, you went into attack, and you spread a parameter of going straight into attack and firing live fire. And by then, you were soaking wet, you smelled, because there's nothing worse than rotting trees, and the odor is that of almost fecal type of odor matter that you had on you, and you went into attack. And then you dried off and continued your, but the basic training there was really prepared us for Korea. We finished up our basic training, and sure enough, we were put on a ship. We were given leave time, and because we were from the United States, mind you, we're in a territory which was not a United States. Right. It was a, but the one good thing, when we were in Hawaii, because we were on a rotation basis, we were getting overseas points. And for the 4 weeks we were there, we got a ½ point towards our rotation for serving in a country where it was we were on a 40-point basis. So when we did reach Korea, we said, hey, we're short timers because we already have rotation points. And we didn't realize till, you know, further on you get in service, you become acclimated to how much time or how little time you have. And it did work in our benefit. And anyway, sure enough, I came home at that time, and it was my first marriage. I got married and returned back to Hawaii, and we were shipped into Korea.
you came home after basic, as you're saying?
After basic, what we did was at that time and when we hit Hawaii, all of us from the Michigan area, we had a hustler with us, Sam Vicari, and Sam right away got in touch with a private airlines where we were looking forward to coming home for our leave time, so that we could get a flight and fill it up and get a good price. And once we hit Hawaii, we started thinking about returning home, because many of us who did return home at that particular time, some of it was the last time they were home, believe it or not. And we had to pay our own flight. And at that time it was, I think it was about 160, 180, which at that time was big bucks.
That's a lot
Mind
of
you,
money.
we were privates. We weren't earning big bucks. Our families were, we were coming out of World War II. I came from a family of 5, 6 of us, and it was hard times. It was hard to raise that money to come home.
No, that was probably more than 2 months' pay.
Yeah, all without a doubt.
As a
So
private.
anyway, from there on, we hit Korea, and then I got assigned to my infantry company. And I got assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division, the 38th Infantry Regiment, and believe it or not, I was in love company. At that time, it was Item, King, Love, and Mike. The names have changed now, yeah, you know, but we always enjoyed the fact that we were love company. And it was humorous, but we were very proud. And I got some history on the 38th Infantry Regiment. And when we hit our company, we had another 2 weeks of bivouac. In other words, we were reorienting ourselves into what we had missed. We were all issued new M1 rifles. At that time, the M1 was the infantry weapon. I was an infantryman. I was an infantry soldier. So I got the M1 weapon, and with the M1 you have to learn your zero, and I was not, mind you, when I was a young man, I had nothing to do with guns. I had nothing to do with weapons. And when I first went on a firing range in bivouac in Hawaii, it scared the crap out of me, because you're firing a weapon that you're unfamiliar with. It has a kick. It's a loud noise. You have a helmet on, and the noise just rattles in your, and to someone who's unfamiliar with firing, it scared me. And when I went first on a range, I couldn't even hit the target. They would give you the red flag, and I was, I had to stay afterwards to try to zero in and be able to pass firing my weapon. So it took me a little bit longer. You have various firing positions, the kneeling, the prone, and I just, it scared me. It scared me. But when we got to Korea, and I got my weapon, and I learned to zero, and I took that weapon, and I got on the firing range, and when I went targeted, and I had my zero, I got 8 out of 8 around the bull. Because you know this is your livelihood, and this is, you learn to baby, and that weapon became part of me all through my time while in Korea. They tell you in service never to volunteer. And I told you about my high school and college background. I was a business major, and I picked up typing and shorthand. And I was online, and anyway, first let's go back. I got online, assigned to my company. I was in the, we were Love Company. I was in a 2nd platoon, And in our platoon, there were 12 of us or 14 of us. And we were put up on Pork Chop Hill. We were on, let me go back to the 38 parallel in Korea. And the 38 parallel was the dividing line between the United Armed Forces and the Chinese forces. And if you were on American Pork Chop, the hill directly across from you was Chinese Pork Chop. If you were on American Baldy, the hill directly across from you was Chinese Baldy. Now, when I first got to the line, we were on Pork Chop. And Pork Chop, there are many histories, a lot of behind, but what we were doing, we had living bunkers and fighting bunkers. And we were on a 38, and all we were doing is we would have patrols, and it was incoming artillery and small arms fire would be part of your living. And when you were up on a hill, we had the living, we would go down from the hill in the morning, you'd get up in the morning, you'd take your pot and your weapon, and you go down and you'd have a hot breakfast. And you have your hot breakfast, you take your pot off, you filled it with hot water, you went back to your fighting bunker. And you had this helmet full of hot water. And what you did with that hot water was you brushed your teeth, you washed your face, you used the hot water, you took a quick under the arm bath, no showers, cleansers. With the remaining hot water, you shaved. After you shaved, you took your weapon, you tore it down, and you cleaned your weapon, all with that one pot of hot water. Now, mind you, you had a canteen, which was your drinking water. And that was going to carry you through the entire day. And after you're done with the hot water, you just threw it out, and you put the pot, because you always wore that steel pot, because any time during the day, there could be incoming, and you would be hitting the probe, or you, and we hit the company, and we were going into division rear. And we got a break because we were getting 4 points up on line, and we were going to go into division rear. And when you go into division rear, your points drop because it's like a rest and recuperation. In other words, you're out of the area that is dangerous. But we're getting ready to go into division rear, and he says, "Hey, second platoon, you guys go to chow first." And this is evening time. And he said, "Oh, but hey," we go down to chow, and they're loading up our, and it happened to be raining that day. And they're loading up our plates, and we had, I'll never forget, we had ham, and we had the raisin dressing, and when they're serving us, they're really loading, and they said, "Hey, for dessert, you guys come back for ice cream." And he says, "Hey, if you want other ham, and there's other guys, you guys," and we said, "What the hell they treat us so good for?" So we finish chow, and then they say, "Hey, you guys are going on patrol."
No.
Oh, crap. Patrol, you know, we're getting ready to, and we're going on patrol. And we're going to leave at nightfall. And we're going to leave, and we're going to set up to engage with possibly the enemy. And first of all, I'm a newcomer. Our sergeant who's taken us out has got a couple weeks where he's getting ready to rotate. So he's a good leader to have. When you go out on patrol, because your area is mined, you have to have someone lead you through the minefield. So we're going through the minefield, and you better just stay right in front of the man in front of you. You don't go off to the left, you don't go off to the right, because if you do, you can blow yourself up. Well, we started out, and we're in a one-line area, and we get through an open area, And then we're going into our point, and each time we reach a point, the first sergeant would call in, we're at such and such, call back to the CP. We're going down into a valley, and all of a sudden flares go off. And they say when flares go off, you hit the prone and just lay. When basic, we'd say hit the prone and lay there, all right? Because you don't know if they're friendly or enemy. And if you're in a lying position, you're hard to decipher. Well, I hit the prone from basic, and I'm laying there. And the regular guys, they're rolling, and they said, Mylenek, start rolling. And I'm following, these guys are there. And then we stopped. And then a sergeant called in, and they're friendly flares. So we continued on. We get to our next call-in point. And I gotta tell you, because I'm coughing now, at that time I had a light cough and cold. And during nighttime, a cough can carry you. And we learned in basic, if you're coughing, cover your mouth. And whatever you do, don't take out your canteen, because a canteen will rattle.
Yeah.
Don't take a drink of water. And I'm thinking about basic training. And I can't help. And I would, I really shouldn't have been on a patrol, because I had a temperature and I had a cough, but I'm not going to bug out my first, I'm not going to say, hey, I want to go on sick call, you know. That wouldn't make me too much of a pal with the other guys in my company. So I was there, and we sit up at our next point, and I'm coughing. And the sergeant says, God bless it, take your canteen out and take a drink of water. You know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't take it out for, but I didn't. It stopped. Pardon me. So then we're supposed to go to our point 3, where we're supposed to set up. We wait about 5 minutes, and a sergeant calls in. He says, this is something that, he called in and said we're at point 3. We were not at point 3. But we were already in a position, let me clear my throat.
Okay.
We were in a position where we heard the enemy. We heard him digging, we heard him talking, we heard him conversing, and he says, we ain't gonna go any further. We ain't gonna go to where we're supposed to be. We're gonna sit here, do our time, say we finished up, we did not engage, and return back. We returned back from the patrol. We met our guide, taking us through the minefield. I gotta tell you this story. The guide starts shooting through. Behind me is my AR man, who's been there for a while. And a BAR is a fast firing weapon. It fires off very fast, quick rounds. Our M1 is fast, but the AR carries 20 rounds. And this guide is moving a little too fast. And this AR man says, hey, Corporal, either you slow down or I'm going to open up my weapon on you, because our lives were in danger. And that corporal slowed down, because he would have opened it up.
You want to take a minute and get a drink?
Let me just have a drink.
Yeah. There's some on the...
Back to our area, we quieted down. I start asking some questions, and I start finding out a little history as to why we did what we did, and why that corporal was so. This is my first patrol. I'm a greenhorn. I'm learning, and he says, Ed, he says he was laying landmines with a friend, and a friend accidentally set off the mine and took his life. And he knew, hey, you don't mess around with landmines. We're going through a minefield. And our lives, I didn't realize, you know, this guy was hurrying, but as I say, you go off one step to the left, one to the right, it can result in death. And that, I learned why he said, hey, I'll blow you away if you don't slow down. And he meant it. He would have, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn these things, you know, in service. Each day was a learning experience, and each day was a closeness, more close proximity to the men you're working with. Got back to the hill very quickly, and we were spending another couple weeks, and a call comes up to the hill that they're looking for anybody who has typing experience. And they say never volunteer. Well, what the heck, I can type. I volunteered it, and I was able to do about 30 words per minute and type. I knew the home and base and everything. And I'll be darned, our company clerk was getting ready to rotate, and they needed, they didn't have, and they would hope to get somebody from the company. And I fortunately got to train with the company clerk for 2 weeks to learn everything. I had no experience as a company clerk, and I fell into, and he taught me everything there is about the company, about the record keeping, about my responsibilities to the company commander, to my first sergeant, to my troops that I had all the records for, keeping all records related to their, and they called, I forget the file, was it 120 or something. I had all their files. I knew everything about when they were promoted last, when their rotation was coming, when they were going to be rotating home. I had to be concerned about R&R because we were in a area where the troops were allowed 5 days R&I. They would go back to Japan, and it was a rest and recuperation. And you had to keep these guys, to get them out of the war zone, to give them 5 days of R&R, where they could drink and get drunk and just do everything a young man would want to do for 5 days, and then return back to the hell of war. And that's what the rest and recuperation was all. But anyway, then I became company clerk, which was very good. We moved off the hill, and we were going into division rear. And division rear would be 8 weeks. And our assignment was Kojido. And Kojido was an island outside of Japan and outside of Korea. And it was a prison camp for all the prisoners we had taken within the Korean conflict. And we were there going to be assigned there for 8 weeks, and all we were going to do was guard prisoners. As I mentioned, it was an area where we were going to get 2 points because it wasn't that hard of duty. It was guarding prisoners and the like. We hit Kojido, and we set up in our, we relieved the troops who were there, and they were going back to Korea, and we took up guard duty. And our particular company, like the other companies, we would take care of guarding the prisoners. They were all under barbed wire. When we hit Kojido, it was one massive prison area with high barbed wire. They did not have a separation, as I told you, of separating officers from enlisted men. And they allowed the officers to mingle with the enlisted men. Well, what it took place were the officers were treated with, when they take out a group of enlisted men to, let us say, dig ditches, the officers wouldn't lift a shovel. They would just watch over their enlisted men. In other words, they had carte blanche, you might say. Which, excuse me, why are they not being treated prisoners like the other prisoners? Anyway, aside from that, what occurred about the first or second week we were there was we had a general in charge of the compound, and he went into the compound with 2 other officers, walked into a prison compound, and was taken hostage. And when he was taken hostage, the prisoner says, "You, before we release him, you are going to give us some breaks." In other words, they got a hostage. They're going to get something in return for releasing, like hostage situations that take place in America and in banks and stuff today. So they were going to call the shots. Well, they didn't realize they're working with the United States Army. And we said, "Oh yeah, you're going to get all the breaks. Oh yeah." Anyway, we got a moratorium. We got the general released. We got him out of there with his 2 aides, and they closed the gates, and then they hit the fan, if you know what I mean. You got your moratorium. Forget about it, baby, because now we take over again. They called in the 101. They called in, and Bull Bodner was the general in charge of the paratroops. He come in. We got a plan that we're going to go into these prisoners. We're going to segregate these prisoners. We're going to, first of all, we're going to build new compounds. We're going to build compounds for enlisted men. We're going to build compounds. And that's where we went from a 2-point area to a 4-point. Because we had a uprising, we're going to settle this. It means that you're becoming a war troop. We got the situation. We were up on our station where we were. I was on a hill looking down at the prisoners. After this uprising, to show the prisoners how we meant business, we're on a hill. The compounds, I'm looking down here. There's hills to the left of us. This is Cogito Islands. We're up there, and all of a sudden, midday, we hear planes coming in. Nobody lets us know. There are our jet planes. They come in over the prison. I'm looking at the hill here. This plane, I could see the pilot coming over the prison to scare the out of the prisoners, to let them know we're meaning. They would come over, head towards that hill. Just before the hill, they'd pull up. They scared the. We're waiting for them to pull up, and I mean fast flight. You're looking at this man, and he's doing this. It just, first of all, we were unaware what the hell's happening. We thought maybe, you know, and it was our own planes preparing them to let them know you're dealing with business. We had built new compounds, new barbed wire fence, higher fences, segregated areas. We were separating the prisoners. The prisoners used to get into these big areas. They would mingle together. They would sit there. They would absolutely diss the American troops, the troops who were guarding. You know, and you couldn't do anything. Bull Bodner would come in and says, "Okay, we're going into these compounds. We're going to interview all these prisoners. We're going to separate them. Enlisted men here, officers here. Go in, did the cleanup with it. You have various grenades. You have grenades that are shrapnel grenades. You have grenades that are concussion grenades. A concussion grenade, you can throw it. It won't give shrapnel, but it'll shake you up. Well, with he's sending in the paratroops, and we're going to support him. And he goes in and he's on Bullboat, or he's on that bullhorn. Do not throw, boom, boom, do not throw concussion grenades, do not throw frag grenades, because frag grenades will spread shrapnel. And I must say that occasionally frag grenades were being, do not throw frag grenades, concussion grenades. And that's where Life magazine, they went in with tanks. They went in with tanks to just knock down offenses, because you're not living here anymore, to show them our power. And behind the tanks were the 101 and were our troops. And we were getting all these prisoners, we were lining them up, we were interviewing them, enlisted men. Anyway, after it was all done, and they went through that compound where the prisoners were held, we found out they held a kangaroo court. They would find their own prisoners guilty of crimes. They killed them and buried them. Their own prisoners.
Right.
This was taking place while we were guarding them. And this was showing you that their officers were still officers in charge. They didn't care that we were guarding them. They were running their own prisons. Well, all that changed afterwards with the new regime and with the new setup. Whenever troops went out and they had an officer in charge, the officer did not have charge. We were in charge, and he was digging holes and he was laying barbed wire or the like. Anyway, we spent our time back there, and very quickly from there we went back to our new positions on the Big Island. And this was early September, after the Kojido bid. And I was company clerk. As company clerk, I had a little bit of break, but I always told the old man who was our company commander, he could be maybe 10 years older than me, but he was the old man. And I said, sir, no matter where we're at, I'll always come up to see you and the guys, because it made the guys feel good, because they were on line, and I knew what the line was. You could be on line today and you could be dead tomorrow. I promised them I would always visit them. When we got into position, they put Love Company up on Baldy. And the reason it was called Baldy is because in Korea, all your hills had foliage. They would have trees, they would have bushes, they would have shrubbery. Baldy was Baldy because they had set in so much artillery and so much small fire that shrubbery and bushes were non-existent. It was all dirt. And when I went up and our company got up on Baldy, they got into position, and the chaplain says, Mylenek. I says, yes, chaplain. He says, I'm going up on a hill, I'm taking the mail up to Love. I says, sir, I says, can I go with you? He says, you want to? And I says, yeah, I'd like to see the old man and say hello. He says, okay. So we got in the Jeep, he had all the mail and I was carrying it with him. We got to, before you get to Baldy, there is a aid station. And there's always an aid station close to the position. And what the aid station is, when they bring the wounded down, they would bring them to the aid station, and there was a doctor there that would look at the wounded and try to give immediate attention. ASP, all right? Plasma situation. Believe it or not, our aid station was called the Donut Shop. And I said, what the hell is a donut shop? I said, well, we got to stop at the donut shop, and I'm expecting, oh boy, you know, before. No, it was the age, and it was just a nickname given. And you had all the sandbags there, and the because the medic in charge there, he was a doctor, first lieutenant officer. He was in charge, and he had medics with him there. And they'd bring the wounded off the hill, and as I said, first aid. From there, either put them on a jeep or a cop chopper, take them out to MASH, which was all your major surgeons. Anyway, we leave and we start on foot. Then we're starting down the road to Baldy. And I'm with the chaplain, and we're with a communication man from Love Company, because he's going to take us up on the hill. And then communication men, all they would do, because all the communications was all wire phones, and when that incoming would come in, it would knock out the wire. They'd have to rewire to get the communication from bunker to bunker and from headquarters to CP. And so he knew the hill, and we start up. And he says, Mylenek, what are you doing? I said, I'm going with it. He says, are you crazy? I says, hey, I promise the old man. He says, okay, when we go up, and I said, you hear hit it, hit it. I said, hey, I know where you're coming from, because you'd go up 10 feet, and you ooh, hit it, and you'd hit it, and it was boom. He'd shake up, get up, okay, let's go. Back up again, and the chaplain and I following the common man, go another 5, 8 feet, you hear it was, hit it, and you'd hit it, because it was incoming. As long as you could hear it, you're okay. But if you didn't hear it, you're in deep. So anyway, we get up to the hill very quickly, get into the bunker, the old man looks at me, he says, what in the are you doing here? I says, and with the old man, when you're company clerk, in a respect, you become the old man, somewhat, because he has certain forms that have to go out once a month. And he'd say, Ed, you get them out, sign them, and don't let me worry about it. In other words, that the men had this or this shot, that they had chlorinated water, and he didn't have to sign them. They were signed by our captain's name, and I was the one that was doing it. But he always had everything back at the high post that we were following suit. In other words, he knew the company was big. So, and so I get up there, and you're in that CP, which is command post, and all you're hearing is boom, 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 incoming. One round after round hitting, sand falling into the bunker, and there's a phone rings, and the old man says, oh, that's the outpost. And I says, who's there? And he told me, 2 of our men from the Love Company, and one of them was Doug, and Doug was always singing, always happy-go-lucky. And the outpost was in front of the CP on Baldy, and they were getting incoming every minute on the minute. So I said, let me speak to Doug if I may, sir. He says, go ahead, and I'm talking. I said, Doug, this is Ed. He says, where the hell are you at, Ed? I said, I'm at the CP. He says, are you crazy? I says, hey. He said, and I could tell the fear in his voice, because it was just, I says, Doug, what's it like there? He says, Ed, we're here only for 1 hour, and that hour is the longest hour we have to spend here. Because all they were doing to make sure that, because the enemy would come in under their own fire. They would come in under their own fire to make sure that we weren't being infiltrated. And I'll bring this up a little bit later, because several days later, Baldy got hit. Love Company moved from Baldy, they moved to the right flank, and King Company took over Baldy. And I have it in a book. It was about September 21st. And it started an artillery barrage. And you learn in service, when you're going into attack, you lay in artillery. And you lay in artillery, and before you go into attack, 100 yards before hitting the position, artillery will stop and you will strike the position. Mind you, artillery will stop. And on September 21st, King Company was on Baldy. They start getting an artillery barrage. They never lifted the artillery. They were being infiltrated. The Chinese had no fear of how many their own men they got killed with their own artillery, because they were killing their own soldiers. But those that got through, I told you we had a living bunker, and maybe 10, 20 yards away was your fighting bunker. And in your fighting bunker, you had your bandoliers of ammunition, and you had your grenades. And if you, that was where, because otherwise you just had your M1 and maybe you had your ammo belt and one bandolier of ammo. But this would be additional ammo in case you had got into a fight. The men couldn't leave their bunkers. They were being infiltrated on, and they were fighting hand-to-hand bunkers and being wiped out, unable to reach their fighting bunkers. King Company had about 112 men. About maybe 14 of them were ROK troops, which were the Royal Korean Army with our U.S. troops. King Company got overrun. Every officer was killed with the overrunning. Before they could retreat their positions, out of the 112, 120, there were maybe about a first sergeant and about 38 men left. And Baldy was lost temporarily. I told you we were, Love Company, we were on the right flank. Naturally, the hit's taking place, you're alert. Right flank is Love Company, left flank is Mike Company. Mike Company is what they call heavy weapons support. They would have heavy mortars, and they would have 50 caliber machine guns, and they would support your infantry companies. Well, immediately when the barrage came, everybody was on alert, and we started Love Company, and I was in division rear. We knew we were in trouble because we got alerted. Company clerks, cooks, and supply sergeants were all division rear. If we were to go up to, which we did move up to Love Company that same, this was early afternoon, we get alerted that we may be moving forward to support our own troops. So we're on alert too. We get our weapons, and the next thing we know, we're being given bandoliers of ammunition, and a bandolier is just a cloth loaded with M1, 2 of them, and then we got live grenades. We got maybe about 8 grenades each. Anyway, let's go back to the position. Love Company start moving from the right flank to Baldy, because we knew Baldy because we were on there. And our officers and the men who were in the right flank started going through the commo trenches, and our purpose and aim was to take back Baldy. You're not going to lose. We're not going to lose that position. No matter what it's going to cost. And the first line of defense is the companies that are there. I told you I was in division rear. The next thing we have trucks pulling in. Company clerks, supply clerks, everybody start boarding the trucks. Had a warrant officer D'Amato was in charge. He says, Mylenek, come on you guys. Our guys, we're loading in trucks, we're starting up, we're going up. And I told you about, we're going up to Baldy. And they were taking us up to the position, the donut shop. Because the donut shop would be the initial point to going to Baldy from where we were. So we were heading up and nighttime had started falling in. The trucks are using the night lights. We're going up roads. And in the meantime, I want you to know, incoming. All we're hearing is incoming. Zip, boom, boom, boom. You can hear them dropping. You can hear them dropping, around you. We reached a position going into the donut shop, and a truck stopped. And Warrant Officer D'Amato comes up and he says, the trucks won't go any further because of the heavy incoming. And I says, sir, we're sitting ducks here. God, if we're 20 guys in a truck. If one round hits us, we're gone. He says, yeah. He says, let's get the H out of here. We got off the trucks and we started down the road towards the donut shop. We're going down the road and you start running and you hear the incoming. You hit the prone. And you get the wobbling, get up again and you start running. You're running and you hit the prone, because as long as you hear it, you're safe enough. And they come that close that you feel a tremor of them hitting to either your left or your right. And you're thank God you get up, everything's okay, you start. We're running towards donut shop. And his lieutenant says, what outfit are you guys with? Sir, we're with the 38 Love Company. We're heading to our position at Baldy area. He says, oh. I said, who are you with, sir? He says, we're the 22nd. We're reinforcing. We're moving up towards Baldy itself. They were continuing down the road. We got into the donut shop position. They had bunkers. We went into the bunkers in front of the donut shop, and we set up 2 men into each position, and 1 man up, 1 man sleep, up hour on the hour, 1 man awake at all times. We had our bandolers. We didn't know, we were just there as support. If they got overrun from Baldy, we would be taking up the arms against the enemy. So we sat there in the nighttime, alert, didn't sleep at all because you're just scared out of your pants, and the incoming. Next thing we knew, the next morning finally comes daylight. At least daylight offers some light, just offers some, even though there's incoming, and then you see what's around you. Wounded coming off the hill. The donut shop, the medic in charge, give him plasma, put him on a jeep, put him on a helicopter. This officer, 1 doctor, making immediate decision, give him, he can wait, let him sit. I'm walking around looking for men for my company. I see 1 sergeant, and you won't believe this. The sergeant I saw was Sergeant Love. We had a Sergeant Love in our company, and he was Love. And Love was up on the hill as reinforcement. And I says, Love, what happened? He says, Ed, he said, I got hit in the hip. And I took a look at him, and he's laying there. And I says, oh, and they were taking others out. And he was laying there. He says, it just got me down. and he was hit for quite so he was getting perhaps plasma and morphine to ease the pain. And it didn't look that bad. And anyway, finally, they got him out to MASH. And remember that name, Sergeant Love. So anyway, we stayed there, and finally, we lost men. The first man we lost was Lieutenant Marshall. We moved into position. Marshall was up on Baldy, behind a tank. On a tank they have phones where you could direct fire from to the tank officer to fire answer. And there was a machine gun position, and Marshall was one of the He was one of the heroes of our company. Maybe 24 years of age, a West Point grad, can be a lifetime soldier, lost his life. Shrapnel to the back of his head, in a position trying to give direct fire from the tank onto the enemy for his boys. Just a super guy. Others were killed defending the position from our company. All in all, I think we lost about 8 men. Marshall was, and I'll tell you how he was liked. I was company clerk. Every guy every man in our company wrote his wife a letter saying what a great guy he was. This was brotherhood.
It sure was. It doesn't happen too often.
No. We took position on Baldy. Believe it or not, our Master Sergeant Legarski sitting up on Baldy. We got it back. They're sitting up there at the top of the hill. We got a Southern boy, a corporal. All of a sudden, we start sending in our own artillery, and it come too close. Where, you know, artillery, they can send it in thinking that they're going beyond, and they were coming close. And this corporal, he was either a corporal or private, he got on the phone and he got in touch with the artillery. There's always a man's officer with artillery who's a forward to give the grids as to where to fire. And he got him on the phone. He says, sir, he says, are you the one giving the grids? He says, yes, I am. He says, well, you're firing on us up on Baldy. We're sitting here and we're getting our own rounds. He says, change it. He says, who's this on the phone? He says, none of your... He said, just change those grids. Blank, blank, blank. Boom. The grids were changed. Fire was moved. But they were sitting up on Baldy, legs spread apart, taken in the sun, and all of a sudden, and when Sergeant Legarski told me about this, I had to laugh because this is some of the humor with service. You know, there's humor in war, and there's bravery and the like. But anyway, we finally got it back, and but it was a frightening experience, and it was a traumatic experience, and it was our troops, our soldiers, our guys, many of them drafted, were there for a purpose, but when it comes down to fighting, not only to defeat the enemy, but to save your life, we were there for it. It was quite an experience. And then I got out of service. I rotated back to the United States. I finished up my service in Chicago. Believe it or not, my experience as a company clerk, when I got in Chicago, I was at 5th Army headquarters. And what I was doing in 5th Army headquarters was assigning young men to their basic training. Enlistees. That was 5th Army headquarters. I left the service. I used my service experience, and I used my veterans benefits. I married into a family of morticians. My father-in-law, who was running the funeral profession, was in ill health. I switched over from the liberal arts business, and I went and I took, Uncle Sam paid for my education, and I received a mortuary science certificate from Wayne State University, paid for by Uncle Sam for my time of duty in service. Which was very nice because my father-in-law died at the time. I was getting the benefits, and it was helping to carry us through some of the hard times till I graduated. So my Army experience paid off in many, many ways. And I want to say something afterwards. In my peacetime as a mortician, I want to tell you about a position I got appointed to. I was appointed to the Selective Service System of the United States, and I was on a draft board.
Oh, wow.
During the Vietnam conflict. And as a board member, we would listen to not veterans, but to draftees as to why they wish to be given and not go to...
Right.
And it was quite an experience, and yet all of us, many of us on the board, one of our board members was a World War I veteran. I was a Korean veteran. The others were businessmen, and we were listening to these youngsters and helping and making decisions as to why they have to serve. And you would do it in a tactful way. We would listen to them and let them know that, no, we can't allow you, to stay home. but we'll give you 30 days and then you'll go serve your country. And we'd use our own experience, which helped a great. I felt very proud being a member of the Selective Service, and I got a nice certificate for it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so that is my, and then afterwards I became a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and take pride in not only the service I gave to my country, but my two brothers, I told you, were in World War I. My father, I'm of Polish descent. My father was 16 years of age. He was a citizen of the United States. He lied about his age, and he went and served in the Polish army during World War I.
Oh.
So we come from a family, and my father instilled upon us the need to love and serve your country.
Right.
He was very proud. He was proud. He was a proud Pole, but he was a more proud American. And that's it.
Do you then have a family of children?
Yes.
Yourself?
Oh yeah. I got 2 children from my first marriage and 2 children from my present.
Oh, okay.
With my wife Patricia. The kids are a nice family. None of them are service. Have been in the service, but the grandkids are so proud when I tell them some of the war stories.
Well, then, they'll enjoy hearing more then when they see this.
Well, no, they are. So I've showed them my medals because I've gotten the Combat Infantryman's Badge for the time on line duty. I have the Korean Service Medal, which was awarded for my time in Korea, and they're very proud of their.
That's great. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes that's not the case.
No, they are.
Right.
Yeah, they tell their friends that Grandpa was in Korea.
Did you? Where was your mortuary here in the Detroit area?
In West Detroit.
Okay.
Yeah. I spent. Believe it or not, I retired from banking, but I'm a licensed mortician to this day.
Oh, so did you ever practice it?
Oh, did I ever?
Okay.
I'm very proud of being a mortician. I take greater pride, and much of it reflects from my time in service. I was 21 years of age when I was drafted. I had uncles who died prior. That's all I saw of death. I recall as a youngster being maybe 10 years of age, my one uncle died, and my 2 cousins, I sort of like looked over them during the funeral and walked with them. And it never dawned on me. But when I married into the family and I chose the profession, I became engulfed in serving the families of deceased, and with it, our daughter is a doctor. From my first marriage, my daughter is a doctor, and part of it, our daughter, current daughter, is a doctor in a hospice.
Oh, wow.
And she grew up in a funeral home atmosphere. And part of her, and my daughter is a retired naval lieutenant commander.
Okay.
She received her medical training with a naval scholarship, and she gave 7 years to the United States Navy. She was stationed in Guam. She became a doctor in Guam because they had a triage there. A civilian airplane crashed, and they were taking care of the survivors from the crash. But she retired as lieutenant. Not retired, she left the service because she gave her 7 years. And she entered the medical practice, and she And much of her service as a hospice is serving those who are ready to. And my wife and I could see her, the influence that the funeral home had on her somewhat, carried into her as a doctor now. So
Yes.
so we do have that. I keep forgetting about it, and I'll go very quickly back to her. She graduated from Wayne State. She had a scholarship, and the wife and I are thinking, well, we're going to have to start. She's going to be going to medical school. We're going to be paying for her medical school. She comes home. She says, Mom, Dad, you may not have to pay for my medical school. We said, what are you talking about? She says, I found out about a naval scholarship exam, and I took it. And if I pass it, the Navy will pay for my scholarship. She passed it. She had to give 7 years to it. She went to Selfridgeville, got sworn in as an ensign. She was an ensign going to Wayne State University, paid for all her medical school, her supplies.
Wow.
She had an ensign's pay while she's in school. And then from there on, she got one of her best medical trainings was the training she got at, what's the naval base? Norfolk.
Norfolk?
Yeah.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah. And she
So
reached the rank of lieutenant. They wanted her to stay. And she was almost tempted. Our family doctor says, what, God, with all the money she was making, lieutenant commander, and she would naturally probably go further. But no, she wanted to go out in the field. And it worked out nice.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're very proud of your family.
Yeah.
You should be. Well, I think we really had a nice chat.
I apologize for...
Please.
No, there's nothing to apologize about it. We covered a lot of information and a lot of experience.
The only thing I'm sorry, before I left the company, the old man took me aside, and I had only a week left, and I was company clerk. And he says, Mylenek, he says, I want you to make up a bunch of, I want some medals. And he wanted Marshall, he wanted to put him up for the Medal of Honor. And myself and several other medals. And I never got to, and the company clerk I took over, I told him about this, and he never pursued it. And it kind of, because I felt Lieutenant Marshall took his own life, and I could have wrote it up. He was taking his own life into his hands when he went behind that tank, and he was looking to direct fire at a, there was on a hill, Joe Chink had a machine gun nest, and he wanted to direct that tank fire, and he was on a phone, and motor come in on the back, and that's my first, because as he went down to division, they took his body down to prepare him, and I went down to what did they call it at that? Graves registration, which was a tent where they were preparing the remains to come back to the U.S. And I unzippered, took a look at him, and God darn, I thought I could shake him and wake him up. Because he got hit in the back of the helmet. It was a head trauma that caused his death. And he looked like you could wake him up. And
well, you know, maybe that could be something you could even pursue, since you have first-hand knowledge that they could, you know,
I always wondered about it.
Give a medal to his family.
Yeah. And I told you, every guy in the company, they brought the letters to me, and I wrote a cover letter and sent it to his wife, because he was so damn well liked.
That's quite a story, and you know, again, we really want to thank you for your service and so forth. And Ann, do you have anything that?
No, I just appreciate you coming and sharing
we all
this.
do.
Yeah,
You know,
And it's tough. There's no
I don't
two
know
ways
if
about it.
anyone else has ever told the story of Lieutenant Marshall, but you've told it now. You've told it now, and
Yeah.
that's on the record now.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
I think I wrote his wife telling you how he lost his life, but more so, black, white, green, yellow. Southern boy. We followed him to the end of the world.
You know, those people are few and far between.
Just had the charisma.
Mhm.
And we're off sound, right?
No.
Okay.
No,
No.
that's okay.
Regular Army men had a dislike for Academy men. I hate to say it, but like there's prejudice everywhere.
Sure.
Prior to our final captain, Captain Modisette, who was there when we got hit on Baldy, we had another captain with us. And he was a graduate of West Point too. But he was in charge of a infantry company. We had a lieutenant colonel who was in charge of our battalion. And he had a grudge against our captain because he was a West Pointer. And when our captain would fall out our company, we were enlisted, we were draftees, but we had Sergeant Legarski and we had the old man who was the West Pointer. And we'd fall out, when you were in division wear, you'd have a parade and you'd put on the blue scarf. But when Legarski fell us out, first of all, Legarski would get us at attention, and we stood 8 foot tall even though we were 6 foot tall. In other words, we were doing it for him and for the old man. And when he turned that company over to the old man, he would highball them just, you know, because he respected the old man and he had this company under his thumb. And we would, when we marched in parade, we marched, everybody knew we were well trained and, you know. And our lieutenant colonel says, Captain, the first time I get to remove you from your infantry company, I'm going to do it. And damn if he didn't, we're on the line, damn if he didn't move him from our company to division rear, where he would be working the bivouac area, training the soldiers. I told you we had 2 weeks bivouac before moving on line. But, well, when you were moving, when we went through bivouac, it was live fire, minefields, etc. So our captain got that position. I'm in division rear. I get a phone call from a lieutenant. He says, Ed, remember? I says, yeah. I says, how's he doing? He says, Ed, he got killed today. I says, what are you talking about? He's in division rear. He says he was training a group of replacements. They went into a minefield and a couple of them set off a mine. And unbeknownst, he ran to them, give him aid, and lost his life.
Right.
Killed in the line of duty. Unfair. Unfair. He didn't deserve to die that way. He deserved to remain with our company for his tour there. And I reflect this because this is like in every lifetime. Oh, I'm envious of you because you've got a better job than me, or you know. And this ranking officer outranked the captain, but he envied him because he was such a sharp, damn soldier, and he was a graduate of West Point. Excuse me. But I had to reflect that because that always preyed on me. You know, seeing how things happen, and it's all part of Army life. I'm sorry. But as I say, with Marshall, he was one hell of a soldier, and Puerto Ricans, blacks, deep Southern blacks, and Marshall was a Southern boy, talked with that Southern drawl, but he loved everybody. Methodist, Protestant, atheist, black, green, or white, and you'd follow that SOB wherever he wanted to take you. He was just had that charisma.
Sounds like quite a man.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
it.
well, I guess we'll wrap everything up.
We got 2
Yeah,
minutes.
I just one comment. It's Mylenek.
Mylenek.
Mylenek. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. I know friends of mine had difficulty pronouncing it. But I was Sergeant Edward J. Mylenek, U.S. 55209-774.
Very good.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Okay.
My
Thank you very
pleasure.
much for
Thank
the
you.
story.